The
Okay.
forward. When The Alchemist was first published 25 years ago in my native Brazil, no one noticed. A bookseller in the northeast corner of the country told me that only one person purchased a copy the first week of its release. It took another 6 months for the bookseller to unload a second copy. And that was to the same person who bought the first. And who knows how long it took to sell the third. By the end of the year, it was clear to everyone that The Alchemist wasn't working. My original publisher decided to cut me loose and cancel our contract. They wiped their hands of the project and let me take the book with me. I was 41 and desperate. How do you want to do it? Just read the whole forward, or do you want to do a few
No,
pages,
just stop when
or-
you're done and then I'll take over.
But I never lost faith in the book or even wavered in my vision. Why? Because it was me in there. All of me. Heart and soul. I was living my own metaphor. A man set out on a journey, dreaming of a beautiful or magical place, in pursuit of some unknown treasure. At the end of his journey, a man realized that the treasure was with him the entire time. I was following a personal legend, and my treasure was my capacity to write. And I wanted to share this treasure with the world. As I wrote The Alchemist, when you want someone, the whole universe conspires to help you. I started knocking on the doors of other publishers. Once open, the publisher on the other side believed in me and my book and agreed to give The Alchemist a second chance. Slowly, through the word of mouth, it finally started to sell. 3,000, then 6,000, then 10,000, book by book, gradually throughout the year. 8 months later, an American visiting Brazil picked up a copy of The Alchemist in a local bookstore. He wanted to translate the book and help me find a publisher in the United States. HarperCollins agreed to bring it to an American audience, publishing it with great fanfare. Ads in the New York Times and influential news magazines, radio and television interviews. But it still took some time to sell. Slowly finding its audience in the United States by word of mouth, just as it did in Brazil. And then one day, Bill Clinton was photographed leaving the White House with a copy. Then Madonna raved about the book to Vanity Fair and people from different walks of life. Rush Limbaugh and Will Smith to college students and soccer moms were suddenly talking about it. The Alchemist became a spontaneous and organic phenomenon. The book hit the New York Times bestseller list, an important milestone for any author, and stayed there for more than 300 weeks.
Wow.
It had since been translated into more than 80 different languages. The most translated book by any living author, and is widely considered one of the 10 best books of the 20th century. People continue to ask me if I knew The Alchemist would be such a huge success. The answer is no. I had no idea. How could I? When I sat down to write The Alchemist, all I knew was I wanted to write about my soul. I wanted to write about my quest to find my treasure. I wanted to follow the omens, because I knew even then that the omens are the language of God. Though The Alchemist is now celebrating its 25th anniversary and is no relic of the past, the book is still very much alive, like my heart and my soul. It continues to live every day because my heart and soul are in it. And my heart and soul is your heart and soul. I am Santiago, the shepherd boy, in search of my treasure. Just as you are Santiago, the shepherd boy, in search of your own. The story of one person is the story of everyone. And one man's quest is the first of all humanity, which is why I believe The Alchemist continues all these years later to resonate with people from different cultures all around the world, touching them emotionally, spiritually, equally without prejudice. I reread The Alchemist regularly every time I do. And every time I do, I'm going to pass my iPad.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I was thinking, whenever we're done reading, we just say pass.
Right.
That way there's like a definitive, okay. I reread The Alchemist regularly, and every time I do, I experience the same sensations I felt when I wrote it. And here's what I feel. I feel happiness because it is all of me and all of you simultaneously. I feel happiness too, because I know I can never be alone. Wherever I go, people understand me. They understand my soul. This continues to give me hope. When I read about clashes around the world, political clashes, economic clashes, cultural clashes, I am reminded that it is within our power to build a bridge to be crossed. Even if my neighbor doesn't understand my religion or understand my politics, he can understand my story. If he can understand my story, then he's never too far from me. It is always within my power to build a bridge. There's always a chance for reconciliation, a chance that one day he and I will sit together sit around a table together and put an end to our history of clashes. And on this day, he will tell me his story and I will tell him mine.
That was still 10 years ago.
Yeah. All right, prologue. The alchemist picked up a book that someone in the caravan had brought. Leafing through the pages, he found a story about Narcissus. The alchemist knew the legend of Narcissus, a youth he knelt daily beside a lake to contemplate his own beauty. He was so fascinated by himself that one morning he fell into the lake and drowned. At the spot where he fell, a flower was born, which was called the Narcissus. But this was not how the author of the book ended the story. He said that when Narcissus died, the goddess of the forest appeared and found the lake, which had been fresh water transformed into a lake of salty tears. Why do you weep? The goddess asked. I weep for Narcissus, the lake replied. Ah, it is no surprise that you weep for Narcissus, they said. For though we always pursued him in the forest, you alone could contemplate his beauty close at hand. But was Narcissus beautiful? The lake asked. Who better than you to know that? The goddesses said in wonder. After all, it was by your banks that he knelt each day to contemplate himself. The lake was silent for some time. Finally, it said, I weep for Narcissus, but I never noticed that Narcissus was beautiful. I weep because each time he knelt beside my banks, I could see in the depths of his eyes my own beauty reflected. What a lovely story, the alchemist thought. Part 1. The boy's name was Santiago. Dusk was falling as the boy arrived with his herd at an abandoned church. The roof had fallen in long ago, and an enormous sycamore had grown on the spot where the sacristy had once stood. He decided to spend the night there. He saw to it that all the sheep entered through the ruined gate and then laid some planks across it to prevent the flock from wandering away during the night. There were no wolves in the region, but once an animal had strayed during the night and the boy had had to spend the entire next day searching for it. He swept the floor with his jacket and lay down, using the book he had just finished reading as a pillow. He told himself that he would have to start reading thicker books. They lasted longer and made more comfortable pillows. It was still dark when he awoke, and looking up, he could see the stars through the half-destroyed roof. I wanted to sleep a little longer, he thought. He had had the same dream that night as a week ago, and once again he had awakened before it ended. He arose and, taking up his crook, began to awaken the sheep that still slept. He had noticed that, as soon as he awoke, most of his animals also began to stir. It was as if some mysterious energy bound his life to that of the sheep, with whom he had spent the past 2 years, leading them through the countryside in search of food and water. They are so used to me that they know my schedule, he muttered. Thinking about that for a moment, he realized that it could be the other way around, that it was he who had become accustomed to their schedule. But there were certain of them who took a bit longer to awaken. The boy prodded them one by one with his crook, calling each by name. He had always believed that the sheep were able to understand what he said. So there were times where he read them parts of his books that had made an impression on him, or when he would tell them of the loneliness or the happiness of a shepherd in the fields. Sometimes he would comment to them on the things he had seen in the villages they had passed. But for the past few days, he had spoken to them about only one thing: the girl, the daughter of a merchant who lived in the village they would reach in about 4 days. He had been to that village only once the year before. The merchant was a proprietor of a dry goods shop, and he always demanded that the sheep be sheared in his presence so that he would not be cheated. A friend had told the boy about the shop, and he had taken his sheep there. "I need to sell some wool," the boy told the merchant. The shop was busy, and the man asked the shepherd to wait until the afternoon. So the boy sat on the steps of the shop and took a book from his bag. "I didn't know shepherds knew how to read," said a girl's voice behind him. The girl was typical of the region of Andalusia, with flowing black hair and eyes that vaguely recalled the Moorish conquerors. "Well, usually I learn more from my sheep than from books," he answered. During the 2 hours that they talked, she told him she was the merchant's daughter and spoke of life in the village, where each day was like all the others. The shepherd told her of the Andalusian countryside and related the news from the other towns where he had stopped. It was a pleasant change from talking to his sheep. "How did you learn to read?" the girl asked at one point. "Like everybody learns," he said, "in school." "Well, if you know how to read, why are you just a shepherd?" The boy mumbled an answer that allowed him to avoid responding to her question. He was sure the girl would never understand. He went on telling stories about his travels, and her bright Moorish eyes went wide with fear and surprise. As the time passed, the boy found himself wishing that the day would never end, that her father would stay busy and keep him waiting for 3 days. He recognized that he was feeling something he had never experienced before: the desire to live in one place forever. With the girl with the raven hair, his days would never be the same again. But finally, the merchant appeared and asked the boy to shear 4 sheep. He paid for the wool and asked the shepherd to come back the following year. Pass.
And now it was only 4 days before he would walk back in that same village. He was excited and at the same time uneasy. Maybe the girl had already forgotten him. Lots of shepherds passed through, selling their wool. "It doesn't matter," he said to his sheep. I know other girls in other places. But in his heart, he knew that it did matter. And he knew that the shepherds, like seamen and like traveling salesmen, always found a town where there was someone who could make them forget the joys of carefree wandering. The day was dawning. The shepherd urged his sheep in the direction of the sun. They never have to make any decisions, he thought. Maybe that's why they always stay close to me. The only things that concerned the sheep were food and water. As long as the boy knew how to find the best pastures in Andalusia, they would be his friends. Yes, the days were all the same, with seemingly endless hours between sunrise and dusk, and they had never read a book in their young lives. And they didn't understand that the boy told them about the sights of the city. They were they were content with just food and water, and in exchange, they generously gave their wool, their company, and once in a while their meat. If I became a monster today and decided to kill them one by one, they would become aware only after most of the flock had been slaughtered, thought the boy. They trust me. They've forgotten how to rely on their own instincts. Because I lead them to nourishment. Because I lead them to nourishment. Boy was surprised at his thoughts. Maybe the church, with the sycamore growing from within, had become haunted. It had caused them to have the same dream for a second time. And it was causing him to feel anger toward his faithful companions. He drank a bit from the wine that remained from his dinner of the night before, and he gathered his jacket close to his body. He knew that a few hours from now, with the sun in its zenith, the heat would be so great that he would not be able to lead his flock across the fields. It was the time of day when all of Spain slept during the summer. The heat lasted until nightfall, and all that time he had to carry his jacket. But when he thought to complain about the burden of its weight, he remembered that because he had the jacket, he had withstood the cold of dawn. We have to be prepared for change, he thought, and he was grateful for the jacket's weight in the light. The jacket had a purpose, and so did the boy. His purpose in life was to travel. And after 2 years of walking in unloosened terrain, he knew all the cities of the region. He was planning on this visit to explain to the girl how it was that a simple shepherd knew how to read. That he had attended a seminary until he was 16. His parents had wanted him to become a priest, and thereby a source of pride for a simple farm family. They worked hard just to have food and water, like the sheep. He had studied Latin, Spanish, and theology. But ever since he had been a child, he wanted to know the world. And this was much more important to him than knowing God and learning about man's sins. One afternoon, on a visit to his family, he summoned up the courage to tell his father that he didn't want to become a priest, that he wanted to travel. People from all over the world would pass through this village, son, said his father. They came in search of new things. But when they leave, they are basically the same people that they were when they arrived. They climb the mountain to see the castle, and they wind up thinking about the past, or that the past was better than what we have now. They have blonde hair or dark skin, but basically they're the same people who live right here. But I'd like to see the castle in the towns where they live. It's funny. Those people, when they see our land, say that they would love to live here forever. His father continued. Well, I'd like to see their land and see how they live, said the son. The people who come here have a lot of money to spend, so they can afford to travel, his father said. Amongst us, the only ones who travel are the shepherds. Well, then I'll be a shepherd. His father said no more. The next day, he gave his son a pouch that held 3 ancient Spanish gold coins. I found these one day in the fields. I wanted them to be a part of your inheritance. But use them to buy your flock. Take to the fields, and someday you'll learn that our countryside is the best, and our women are the most beautiful. He gave the boy his blessing. The boy could see his father's gaze. The boy could see in his father's gaze a desire to be able himself to travel the world. A desire that was still alive. Despite his father's having to bury it over a dozen years under the burden of the struggling for water to drink, food to eat, and the same place to sleep every night of his life. The horizon was tinged with red, and suddenly the sun appeared. The boy thought back to the conversation with his father and felt happy. He had already seen many castles and met many women, but none the equal of the one who awaited him several days hence. He owned a jacket, a book that he could trade for another, and a flock of sheep. But most important, he was able every day to live out his dream. If he were to tire of endless fields, he could sell his sheep and go to sea. By the time he had enough of the sea, he would already have known the other cities, other women, and other chances to be happy. I couldn't have found God in the seminary, he thought, as he looked at the sunrise. Whenever he could, he sought out a new road to travel. He had never been to that ruined church before, in spite of having traveled through those parts many times. The world was huge and inexhaustible. He had only to allow his sheep to set the route for a while. and he would discover other interesting things. The problem is that they don't even realize that they're walking a new road every day. They don't see that the fields are new and the seasons change. All they think about is food and water. Maybe we're all that way, the boy mused. Even me. I haven't thought of other women since I met the merchant's daughter. Looking at the sun, he calculated that he would reach Tarifa before midday. There, he could exchange his book for a thicker one, fill his wine bottle, shave, and have a haircut. He had to prepare himself for his meeting with the girl. And he didn't want to think about the possibility that some other shepherd with a larger flock of sheep had arrived there before him and asked for her hand. It's the possibility of having a dream come true that makes life interesting, he thought, as he looked again at the position of the sun and hurried his pace. He had suddenly remembered that in Tarifa there was an old woman who interpreted dreams. The old woman led the boy to a room at the back of her house. It was separated from her living room by a curtain of colored beads. The room's furnishings consisted of a table, an image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and 2 chairs. The woman sat down and told him to be seated as well. Then she took both of his hands in hers and began to quietly pray. It sounds like a gypsy prayer. The boy had already experienced on the road with the gypsies. They also traveled, but they had no flocks of sheep. People said that gypsies spent their lives tricking others. It was also said that they had a pact with the devil, and that they kidnapped children and, taking them away to their mysterious camps, made them their slaves. As a child, the boy had always been frightened to death that he would be captured by the gypsies. His childhood fear returned when the old woman took his hand in hers. But she had the Sacred Heart of Jesus there, he thought, trying to reassure himself. He didn't want his hand to begin trembling, showing the old woman that he was fearful. He recited an Our Father's Highway. Very interesting, said the woman, never taking her eyes from the boy's hands. Then she fell silent. The boy was becoming nervous. His hands began to tremble. The woman sensed it, quickly pulled his hands away. I didn't come here to have you read my poem, he said, already regretting having come. He thought for a moment that it would be better to pay her fee and leave without learning a thing. That he was giving too much importance to his recurrent dream. You came so that you could learn about your dreams. And dreams are the language of God. When he speaks in our language, I can interpret what he has said. But if he speaks in the language of the soul, it is only you who can understand. But whichever it is, I'm going to charge you for the consultation. Another trick, the boy thought, but he decided to take a chance. The shepherd always takes his chances with wolves and with drought. That's what makes a shepherd's life exciting. I've had the same dream twice, he said. I dreamed that I was in a field with my sheep when a child appeared and began to play with the animals. I don't like people to do that because the sheep are afraid of strangers. But children always seem to be able to play with them without fighting with them. I don't know why. I don't know how animals know the age of human beings. Tell me more about your dreams, said the woman. I have to get back to my cooking, and since you don't have much money, I can't give you a lot of time. The child went on playing with my sheep for quite a while, continued the boy, a bit upset. And suddenly, the children took me by the hands and transported me to the Egyptian pyramids.
He paused for a moment to see if the woman knew what the Egyptian pyramids were, but she said nothing. Then, at the Egyptian pyramids, he said the last 3 words slowly so that the woman would understand. The child said to me, "If you come here, you will find a hidden treasure. And just as she was about to show me the exact location, I woke up both times. The woman was silent for some time. Then she again took his hands and studied them carefully. I'm not going to charge you anything now, she said, but I want 1/10 of the treasure if you find it. The boy laughed out of happiness. He was going to be able to save the little money he had because of a dream about hidden treasure. Well, interpret the dream, he said. First, swear to me. Swear that you will give me 1/10 of your treasure in exchange for what I'm going to tell you. The shepherd swore that he would. The old woman asked him to swear again while looking at the image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. It's a dream in the language of the world, she said. I can interpret it, but the interpretation is very difficult. That's why I feel that I deserve a part of what you find. And this is my interpretation. You must go to the pyramids in Egypt. I have never heard of them, but if it was a child who showed them to you, they exist. There you will find a treasure that will make you a rich man. The boy was surprised and then irritated. He didn't need to seek out the old woman for this, but then he remembered that he wasn't going to have to pay anything. I didn't need to waste my time just for this, he said. I told you that your dream was a difficult one. It's the simple things in life that are the most extraordinary. Only wise men are able to understand them. And since I am not wise, I have had to learn other arts, such as the reading of palms. Well, how am I going to get to Egypt? I only interpret dreams. I don't know how to turn them into reality. That's why I have to live off what my daughter provides me with. And what if I never get to Egypt? Then I don't get paid. It wouldn't be the first time. And the woman told the boy to leave, saying she had already wasted too much time with him. So the boy was disappointed. He decided that he would never again believe in dreams. He remembered that he had a number of things he had to take care of. He went to the market for something to eat. He traded his book for one that was thicker, and he found a bench in the plaza where he could sample the new wine he had bought. The day was hot and the wine was refreshing. The sheep were at the gates of the city in a stable that belonged to a friend. The boy knew a lot of people in the city. That was what made traveling appeal to him. He always made new friends, and he didn't need to spend all of his time with them. When someone sees the same people every day, as had happened with him at the seminary, they wind up becoming a part of that person's life. And then they want the person to change. If someone isn't what others want them to be, the others become angry. Everyone seems to have a clear idea of how other people should lead their lives, but none about his or her own. He decided to wait until the sun had sunk a bit lower in the sky before following his flock back through the field. 3 days from now, he would be with the merchant's daughter. He started to read the book he had bought. On the very first page, it described a burial ceremony, and the names of the people involved were very difficult to pronounce. If he ever wrote a book, he thought, he would present one person at a time so that the reader wouldn't have to worry about memorizing a lot of names. When he was finally able to concentrate on what he was reading, he liked the book better. The burial was on a snowy day, and he welcomed the feeling of being cold. As he read on, an old man sat down at his side and tried to strike up a conversation. What are they doing? The old man asked, pointing at the people in the plaza. Working, the boy answered dryly, making it look as if he wanted to concentrate on his reading. Actually, he was thinking about shearing his sheep in front of the merchant's daughter, so that she could see that he was someone who was capable of doing difficult things. He had already imagined the scene many times, every time the girl became fascinated when he explained that the sheep had to be sheared from back to front. He also tried to remember some good stories to relate as he sheared the sheep. Most of them he had read in books, but he would tell them as if they were from his personal experience. She would never know the difference because she didn't know how to read. Meanwhile, the old man persisted in his attempt to strike up a conversation. He said that he was tired and thirsty and asked if he might have a sip of the boy's wine. The boy offered his bottle, hoping that the old man would leave him alone. But the old man wanted to talk, and he asked the boy what book he was reading. The boy was tempted to be rude and move to another bench, but his father had taught him to be respectful of the elderly. So he held out the book to the man for two reasons. First, that he, himself, wasn't sure how to pronounce the title. And second, that if the old man didn't know how to read, he would probably feel ashamed to decide of his own accord to change benches. Said the old man, looking at all sides of the book as if it were some strange object. This is an important book, but it's really irritating. The boy was shocked. The old man knew how to read and had already read the book. And if the book was irritating, as the old man had said, the boy still had time to change it for another. It's a book that says the same thing almost all other books in the world say, continued the old man. It describes people's inability to choose their own personal legends, and it ends up saying that everyone believes the world's greatest lie. What's the world's greatest lie? The boy asked, completely surprised. It's this, that at a certain point in our lives, we lose control of what's happening to us, and our lives become controlled by fate. That's the world's greatest lie. That's never happened to me, the boy said. They wanted me to be a priest, but I decided to become a shepherd. Much better, said the old man, because you really like to travel. He knew what I was thinking, the boy said to himself. The old man, meanwhile, was leafing through the book without seeming to want to return it at all. The boy noticed that the man's clothing was strange. He looked like an Arab, which was not unusual in these parts. Africa was only a few hours from Tarifa, when one had only to cross the narrow straits by boat. Arabs often appeared in the city, shopping and chanting their strange prayers several times a day. Where are you from? The boy asked. From many places. No one can be from many places, the boy said. I'm a shepherd and I have been to many places, but I come from only one place, from a city near an ancient castle. That's where I was born. Well, then, we would say that I was born in Salem. The boy didn't know where Salem was, but he didn't want to ask, fearing that he would appear ignorant. He looked at the people in the plaza for a while. They were coming and going, and all of them seemed to be very busy. So what is Salem like? He asked, trying to get some sort of clue. It's like it always has been. No clue yet, but he knew that Salem wasn't in Andalusia, and if it were, he would already have heard of it. And what do you do in Salem? He insisted. What do I do in Salem? The old man laughed. Well, I'm the king of Salem. People say strange things, the boy thought. Sometimes it's better to be with the sheep who don't say anything. I'm better still to be alone with one's book. They tell their incredible stories at the time when you want to hear them. But when you're talking to people, they say some things that are so strange that you don't know how to continue the conversation. My name is Melchizedek, said the old man. How many sheep do you have? Enough, said the boy. He could see that the old man wanted to know more about his life. Well, then we've got a problem. I can't help you if you feel you've got enough sheep. The boy was getting irritated. He wasn't asking for help. It was the old man who had asked for a drink of his wine and had started the conversation. Give me my book, the boy said. I have to go and gather my sheep and get going. Give me 1/10 of your sheep, said the old man, and I'll tell you how to find the hidden treasure. The boy remembered his dream, and suddenly everything was clear to him. The old woman hadn't charged him anything, but the old man, maybe he was her husband, was going to find a way to get much more money in exchange for information about something that didn't even exist. The old man was probably a gypsy too. But before the boy could say anything, the old man leaned over, picked up a stick, and began to write in the sand of the plaza. Something bright reflected from his chest with such intensity that the boy was momentarily blinded. With a movement that was too quick for someone his age, the man covered up whatever it was with his cape. When his vision returned to normal, the boy was able to read what the old man had written in the sand. There, in the sand of the plaza of that small city, the boy read the names of his father and his mother and the name of the seminary he had attended. He read the name of the merchant's daughter, which he hadn't even known, and he read things he had never told anyone. And there, I believe we will stop.
Yeah. Works for me.
I love when like lessons are told in a story.
Right.
Those are my favorite books, and the books that I have learned the most from, like this one and The Peaceful Warrior and Celestine Prophecy. They're all stories, but they teach such profound lessons.
Yeah, there was a lot in there. I got me a few times.
Is there anything that is alive for you right now?
No, not that I know. I mean, there was so much in there, and I even brought tears a couple times, but not that I can point out.
There is this line. I couldn't have found God in the seminary, he thought as he looked at the sunrise.
Right.
And it reminded me of, and like the way in the foreword or the prologue or whichever one, where he was describing how the book was his, like the expression of himself into this world, right? It was him giving it to this world so the world can get to know him. And so those two things coupled together. So that's what I feel like the sacred wild is to me. And then in that moment of, I couldn't find God in a seminary as he watched the sunrise.
Right.
Like this whole first part of my life, I had lived with my nose in the book, understanding human behavior, understanding trauma, understanding what connection is, understanding the depth and breadth and the expansiveness of love and what love means, and understanding how the brain works, and understanding and understanding and understanding. And I could talk about it all day. And this last year has genuinely, truly taught me the phrase, I think it was Einstein that said, if you cannot explain what you're teaching in 3 sentences, you need to study more.
Ooh.
Because over this last year, I've finally, or it's the last 2 years really, I've finally allowed myself to begin living and experiencing and embodying what it was I was learning about. And now I have a whole new understanding of what love is. I have a whole new understanding of what connection is. I have a whole new understanding of what it is to feel connected to spirit. Because I'm not learning about it. I'm not watching other people do it or listening to what other people have to say about it. It's what I have experienced. And so that little phrase just like unlocked and reminded me of all of that. That's why I know so much about healing trauma, because I've done it. That's why. And so like it kind of expands on the conversation we were having last night about having this like compassion, yet detachment from other people's criticism.
Right.
And I was thinking about that today, because now in this season of my life where I'm at, the people who are doing it would never criticize. They would support. The people who are doing it would never judge. They would honor. because they know.
The work that
And
goes in.
those are the people that have the wisdom to offer, you know? So that's my little piece.
Yeah, that statement was big. That hit me pretty heavy too. But because I mean, I have tried seeking God in so many different directions, and I don't think it was until these last few years that I let go of the concept of God, because everything was God, and that was something that took a long time to sink in. I could say it for many years now. God is everything. That was an easy understanding for me, but to be able to experience that, it's been a lot. It's been a lot more, a lot less time. Like in the last couple of years, maybe the last 3 years, I finally have learned that is my truth. Like God is everything, and being able to experience it that way changes how you perceive everything, right? Like if everything is God, then that's pretty profound. Like that's the experience of life. And that, it's kind of funny because like we were talking here last night about, I think the question came up, the question was like, who is your best friend? And like I have a lot of people I could have labeled, and I have a lot of really close friends, and but childhood best friend, like I didn't like my childhood. I didn't like that it was always this seeking of God. That was the best friend mentality for me. And so when the question came up, I didn't have an answer. Like, who was your childhood best friend? And it just, I was stumped. Like I could put names to a couple faces, but like those faces are gone today. I have nobody left from back then. Like everybody has removed, or I have removed them, all the way down to even family. Like, because you could easily say like my sister, but I mean even that, like that's not the friend that I was looking for. That's not the friend that I would call my best friend today. And it's a weird kind of concept until I boil it down and realize that it was just everything. Like my pets were probably my closer friends than people.
Mhm.
Like it was just the childhood I had. And then I look at it how kind of more like what we were talking about last night in the regards of the experiences that I had showed me that everything, that I guess it boils it back down to that God concept, that we're all part of that we're all that God. And so all those experiences I had with the family and this Ozzy and Harriet life, and not having to ever worry about any monetary needs, and and all that stuff was taken care of. But the soul journey was kind of broken. So I didn't have that need to have best friends. Like I had people that I hung out with, but they weren't the people I wanted to hang out with. So the people I wanted to hang out with didn't want me around. And so it was this like triangle of chaos. And it wasn't until, I don't know, it wasn't until adulthood did that concept of best friend come into place. And then it wasn't until I got really close to people does that concept even mean something. And today it looks a lot different, because it's that everything's just an extension of God. And then that's where I can put that friendship place in there, like with you or with Tommy, or whatever, with Steph or whatever. Like these are people that are indispensable. And that's kind of what that best friend thing is today. And that's just an extension of God, which takes it back to the statement in the book. Like if I'm looking for God in a book or in a prayer or then I'm missing the point. Like last night, turning the corner and seeing the moon, that's fucking God. Like
Yeah.
that's the sunrise, that's the sunset, that's the pet, that's
Right.
all the things.
And then like extending that, right? Like, yes, that's God. And so is my bank account when it's at $10 and I still have 5 days before payday.
Right.
That's God too.
Right.
And I like when you were talking about the best friend thing right now, I started thinking back because like, you know, I have memories of like when I was in, you know, second grade, third grade of like when I, you know, had Misty as my best friend. But before that, it was the trees, it was the animals, and it was the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I would go find the frogs, and I'd go find the lizards, and I would find all the spiders, and I would crawl up in a tree and I would read my books. Like when I think of a best friend now, like now that I have that capacity, right? Like I think of you, I think of Des, you know, or Summer or Carrie or Poppy. It's this like warm, safe hug where
Right.
I know I can go and just be. I can be exactly who I am, how I am. No need to like hold things back or, you know, not share my full self because I know all of you honor it and respect it and know how to receive it. And if you don't have the capacity, you'll tell me, right? But that's what that same feeling is what I had when I was outside and I was chasing the frog and playing with the lizard and climbing my trees and getting lost in my book. Like those were my best friends during some of the hardest times.
Right.
And so, and that like that's it, right? And going into it, being more aware and conscious that the story has shifted so much in how I show up. Because like I was just saying, you know, with my group of close friends, best friends, I don't have to hold myself. I can share all of me with you guys. And before I had this narrative that said if I didn't share my entire self, then I was withholding, and that was wrong. And now the narrative is that I'm walking in conscious awareness of who is able and willing to receive me fully with respect and honor as a sacred being, because not everybody has those tools. Everybody has those skills or capabilities. And so now it's changed from this narrative of it's wrong to withhold yourself to it's wise to be aware of who is able to receive the full capacity of who you are.
Right. Oh. Rolling. Sorry about that. Am I there? Am I back?
No, I don't see you.
I don't know what happened.
Oh,
Oh,
there you are. You're back.
Like a telemarketer takes away the call.
But I love these books. Like the last part that we read, right? How sometimes or at some points in our life, it's so easy. The first narrative is how somebody's trying to take from you, right? Between the gypsy or the dream interpreter and then the king. Like his first thought isn't that this amazing thing is happening. And it's, oh, I know what's going on. You're the gypsy's husband and you're here to take money from me or take my sheep or whatever the case may be. Right. And I can't even, there's something else that was just like something that we do. Oh, the help, right? He's like, well, if you have plenty of sheep, then I can't help you. Right. And I don't need help, you know, just like that resistance of like, This is literally God giving you abundance and you're saying no. Like how many areas in our life do we do that?
Right.
It's
Yeah,
so
hold on to
funny.
the familiar and not let go because it's being handed to us.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
It's
I feel
too,
like
see,
that's
if
kind
it's,
of a step. That's like what's happening right now. I think for me, just I was doing so well financially with this last job that I didn't want to release it and let it go, even though it was miserable. And it's blatantly clear that this is gonna be bigger and better. And I
yeah,
couldn't step away until finally he pissed me off enough to be like, all right, I
right.
don't care if this is bigger or better. I'm leaving anyway.
So if you brought in that abundance while you were miserable, think about what abundance is going to be like now
Right.
when you're free and open to receive. Because when we're miserable, we're closed, we can't receive.
Right.
But when we're
Right. We're still in
open,
flight or fight.
but like, look at how much abundance you were receiving when you were closed and shut off, right? And so it's just gonna grow exponentially. It's gonna be
Right.
wild. I'm so excited to see what happens. Yeah, because when we're open and calm and relaxed, and that like goes into the whole note-taking thing, right? When we're thinking about taking notes and trying to remember everything and trying to take everything in, we're focused on the trying to take it in instead of the thing itself.
Right.
When we're relaxed and just read and just receive, we're in the space of being able to receive, of reception, right? Our muscles are calmer, are relaxed, are loose. Our brain is quiet. And in that quiet is when it like is able to take it in. And we don't have to know it all now. Like trust that you have experienced this. You heard the words and experienced the response to those words, and they will always live in you. And they will surface exactly when they're meant to surface and be shared.
Right.
It's like going through a medicine journey. There's so much that you experience in a medicine journey. And people always are like, I have to write it all down, or I have to do this, and I have to do. You had that experience. It's now in you. It always has been. You just saw it for the first time. You've released what was blocking your access to it. Now it gets to be in you. You don't have to, you don't have to try to remember. You just are. It is.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to read this book together.
Yeah, that was fun.